I understand that hindsight is always 20/20.
No, let's talk about it.
But the question is, why didn't you do more, connect the dots, and put them out of business?
All right, let's talk about it. Now, I will answer all those things on the merits, but first I want to talk about the context in which this arises. I'm being asked this on the Fox network. ABC just had a right-wing conservative running their little pathway to 9/11, falsely claiming it was based on the 9/11 Commission report, with 3 things asserted against me directly contradicted by the 9/11 Commission report.
Completely in one side and out the other.
It just disappeared. It disappeared like a bad.
In the years since these horrific events, there have been numerous films that have attempted, at least in part, to answer a simple and yet complex question. How did this happen? One of these films was far more ambitious than the others. In 2006, on the 5th anniversary of 9/11, ABC, owned by Disney, was set to broadcast The Path to 9/11, a 5-hour-plus miniseries over 2 nights which examined the historical events leading up to the attacks of 9/11. To write the docudrama, based on the 9/11 Commission report, they hired an award-winning Iranian-American screenwriter named Cyrus Nowrasteh.
I was shocked that any network would even want to do it. ABC especially is not known as a network that does this kind of hard-hitting docudrama, but none of them do it. The idea that a major network wanted to do a story about the most tragic event in American history surprised me.
The airing of The Path to 9/11 on broadcast TV meant that potentially tens of millions of mainstream Americans would be exposed to the full context of the enemy we face and learn the largely ignored history that led to the attack on America.
That's what Path to 9/11 is. Path to 9/11 goes back and re-examines the failures in the lead up to 9/11, the opportunities that we had to stop it. It's sort of a how we got there.
But instead of a badly needed history lesson, the political left saw the film only as a threat to the legacy of a former president, and by extension, a future contender for the office. Today, after having its accuracy attacked by the Clinton spin machine, The Path to 9/11 is largely remembered as the most controversial miniseries in television history.
What is the controversy? Whether the Clinton White House missed an opportunity to get Osama bin Laden well before 9/11.
They saw it as a threat, and it exposed sort of a lot of hot-button truths that they didn't want out there. And they said, you know what? We're going to destroy it. We're going to destroy it, and we're going to destroy the people involved with it.
Nowrasteh's first major decision while writing the screenplay was to expand on the politically motivated, narrow scope of the narrative in the 9/11 Commission report.
I felt the Commission report itself was limited because it only went back to 1998. And a lot of the research that I'd done, I felt, the two attacks on the World Trade Center are connected.
The first attack on the World Trade Center, led by what is now known as Al-Qaeda, occurred in 1993. 6 people were killed, over 1,000 were injured. Then President Clinton never even visited the site.
He treated it like a governor treated a tornado. He thought that people needed calm and reassurance. He didn't see it as an attack on the United States.
Also in 1993, an Al-Qaeda warlord in Mogadishu killed 18 U.S. troops in a battle that was memorialized in the film Black Hawk Down. Clinton again viewed it as an isolated incident, though the U.S. intelligence community saw the episode as another sign the United States was at war.
The intelligence agency clearly marked that as the first attack by bin Laden against the United States.
Between 1996 and 1998, Osama bin Laden himself, on TV, declared war against the United States 8 separate times. The only person who wasn't paying attention in the National Security Command chain was Bill Clinton himself.
President Clinton himself has referred to 9/11 Commission report as a political document. And he should know it is precisely because of him. He and his friends made sure that a lot of his closest political allies were on that commission.
They wanted to be loved. And the purpose of a commission like that is not to want to be loved, but rather be hated. Because if you're loved by everybody, you're not doing your job right.
The idea that the whole story is in the 9/11 Commission report is just absurd. I know at least several dozen officers who testified under oath before those commissioners and supplied documents that refute some of the stuff that's in the published in the report as a finding.
And as you try to place blame, you would have had a tremendous debate as to how much blame to place and so on. So we decided in the commission, look, let's tell the facts, because that's what we were mandated to do by Congress. And people can make their own conclusions. You can read the report and you can decide this one and that one, but basically, there were a number of people in 2 administrations who deserve some blame. But to single out people who we thought was wrong, so we just simply had a fact-based report and let the public read the report, and if they want to place blame, they can.
Because of security concerns for the cast and crew, shooting for the path to 9/11 began under the name Untitled History Project. Narasta, the writer and also a producer on the film, had to answer to numerous network executives as well as a team of lawyers, and a contract that required extraordinary substantiation for every scene in the film.
I was told that I was going to deliver what's called an annotated script, which is, for lack of a better word, very involved footnotes for every scene in the movie, and that the attorneys at ABC would go over this and vet it very carefully.
And without an annotation, you can't get an E&O policy, an errors and omission policy. Without that, you cannot go on the air. But once you've shot a film, and it's approved, and annotated, and it's there is no reason for removing it other than censorship.
The level of oversight, the level of scrutiny, for me, at least in my career, was unprecedented, and I haven't heard of any projects that have been held to a higher standard than this one was.
I was accountable to an army of consultants on the set every day. CIA, FBI, Secret Service, Air Traffic Control. This wasn't people that I was calling. They were standing there by me with the camera, guys that had been there.
By the summer of 2006, the path to 9/11 had been completed and legally vetted. After the filmmakers had been presented to the entertainment media in Pasadena, the top executives at Disney and ABC were, by all accounts, ecstatic over the final product.
All of the power brokers at Disney and ABC are there. Anne Sweeney said to me that there is nothing that Disney or ABC has ever done that is better than this, and that she was so proud of it. And Steve McPherson expressed the desire that, if it was up to him, he'd show this every 9/11, every year. And I think that was the intent, to basically have these 2 nights, and we'll show it every year, and it'll be considered kind of the definitive work about this tragedy.
But earlier that day at the press availability, a stunning lack of substantive questions from the news media left the filmmakers unprepared for the coming storm.
We answered a few questions. The impression we got was they didn't bother to watch it. But if I'm sitting there as a journalist and I've got in my hotel room an upcoming 6-hour miniseries called The Path to 9/11, I might want to take a look at that. You might want to do a little research, maybe watch even 10 minutes and ask a pertinent question. We didn't get it.
Seems to me I read somewhere that you're of Middle Eastern descent, and I wonder whether you've had any experiences in the last 5 years with ethnic profiling.
So what I thought was these people were probably partying too much, or unprofessional, or uninterested. And yes, I think it may have put us into a false sense of security.
However, when the Path to 9/11 pre-airing promotional tour shifted from Los Angeles to Washington, D.C. for a screening at the National Press Club, a firestorm was about to be sparked.
Now, here's the problem. You have a screening in Washington, D.C. for the National Press Club and you invite all these Washington people. You can't show a 5.5 hour plus movie. So they only showed night one. And night one focuses on the failures of the Clinton administration. Night two focuses on the failures of the Bush administration. But in the Q&A afterwards, after showing only night one, where we focus on the Clinton failures, Richard Benveniste, who is an attorney for the Clintons and who was also on the 9/11 Commission, who's very much a political player and a Clinton defender, got up and criticized the program, attacked me. I felt, okay, here it is.
What was revealed in that audience that night is that people were more concerned with their own turf. They were concerned with their political party, with their jobs, with their bureaucratic position.
My memory is that a couple of people got up and asked quite pointed questions. Other people, including representatives of the families, got up asking very supportive questions. The families who were there loved it. I mean, they thought this is something which really dramatizes the problems as I saw it and would help in the fight, and so the families were all for it, but some of the people who were there who worked in government or ran around government didn't.
It was parochial, it was small, it was petty. And the film was big. The film was raising big questions about our survival as a country, about what happened on 9/11, how we got there. And the people in that room were circling the wagons. It was a pathetic thing to see.
But basically, I thought, okay, maybe this is the extent of it. Maybe we'll hear from these guys. But I did not think it was going to be huge. However, right after the interview, Michael Barone, who I just met at the cocktail party before the screening, who writes for U.S. News and World Report, and a former Democratic Party strategist, comes up to me and says, let's have dinner. Now, I just met this guy. He's telling me, let's have dinner. It's 11 o'clock.
I believe I said something on the order of, you heard the questions from Richard Benveniste. I think you will probably get a lot of attacks on this film by people associated with the Clinton administration, perhaps by President Clinton himself, because they're going to see it as an attack on the competence or performance of the Clinton administration. They want to see the name of that administration in shining lights in history and not held up as one that failed to do something that it should have done to protect America. And so, when the attack machine gets going, it gets pretty rough out there.
And he said to me, the Clinton machine is going to launch an attack to discredit you and this movie and try to get it pulled from the air. I laughed. I thought, you gotta be kidding. And furthermore, not in a million years could they pull that off.
It seemed to me that when I mentioned that such an attack might come, I had the impression that it was the first time such a thought had entered his mind.
Barone, who's known for his forecasting, called this one dead on, unfortunately.
What happened in the subsequent weeks of that screening, to my mind, was one of the most disappointing, deplorable, episodes I've ever seen in Hollywood.
That was my first indication that the film was not going to be received with unanimous raves.
Word spread quickly among the pro-Clinton forces that a prime-time miniseries was about to hold the Clinton administration accountable for failing to see the scope of the al-Qaeda threat and for not eliminating Osama bin Laden despite repeated opportunities to do so. That part 2 of the film criticized the Bush administration didn't seem to matter.
I think they wanted to deflect and diminish the power of this movie any way that they could. I think they wanted to attack it on a historical, factual basis. I think they wanted to defend the Clinton legacy, and they wanted to make sure that people didn't see it.
My concerns were about the jihadis and the Islamists, that they might be upset because they get upset about anything. You're not supposed to even really talk about them. As it turned out, we didn't hear a peep from any single Islamic organization. I don't know why they would come forward when the Democratic Party was doing the dirty work.
The Clinton forces were swift to act. On September 1st, 2006, just 9 days before the film was scheduled to air, Bill Clinton's attorney Bruce Lindsay wrote a letter to Disney president and CEO Bob Iger. Lindsay questioned Narasta's, quote, political leanings, a weapon with which left-wing media outlets immediately attacked.
Judd Lagum is the editor of thinkprogress.org, which has led the way in investigating the path to 9/11, also research director for the Center for American Progress. Mr. Lagum, thank you for your time tonight.
Thanks for having me.
Is there any hard evidence that Mr. Narasta is interested in advancing a political agenda in the movies or in this movie?
Well, I think there is, both because he admits that he's a conservative. He says he's more of a libertarian than a strict conservative, but a conservative nonetheless.
I guess I lean conservative, especially when you're talking about national security issues and war on terrorism, and that's more a personal thing. My family's Iranian. My parents were forced to flee Iran in 1979 when Khomeini came to power. The fact of the matter is, I have a personal experience with Islamic fundamentalism, with Islamic terrorism.
The left quickly smeared Narasta as a tool of the political right, and the film as a hit piece on Bill Clinton, a theory that made Narasta's choice of a research assistant who voted for Clinton twice seem rather odd.
At what point in the process did you and Cyrus decide that you were going to do a hit job on Bill Clinton?
You know, I've known Cyrus for several years, and maybe 8 years, something like that, and I can say that he is not a political animal. Cyrus loves history.
The fantasies of a right-wing conspiracy were given added fuel when radio talk show host Rush Limbaugh revealed on the air that he had already seen the film, loved it, and was a friend of Narasta's.
The path to 9/11 essentially chronicles everything we know that happened in the 90s that prevented the capture of Osama bin Laden. It indicts the Clinton administration. A friend of mine did this. His first name is Cyrus.
Rush mentioned on his program my friend Cyrus. And the attackers of the movie seized upon this as proof that I was a right-wing nut. Now, here's the deal. I met Rush Limbaugh probably a year earlier or so at a party on the set of the show 24. Rush Limbaugh had nothing to do with the writing of this movie. I had never even met Rush Limbaugh when I wrote this movie.
I mean, Cyrus is also friends with Oliver Stone, you know, and he has worked for Oliver Stone. And the projects that Cyrus has worked on include things like 10,000 Black Men Named George, which is about an African-American communist and a labor strike. You know, so these aren't the earmarks of a right-wing nut job.
What makes this so special, this case, and so fascinating, is that the people that made this movie, the many executives and many people behind this, consider themselves very left. And we're so proud to be able to do this. I mean, I remember hearing conversations of people going, man, we're gonna really hear it from the Bush administration on this. We're really, you know, they're gonna really freak out. But this needs to be told.
The Bush administration took no official position on the miniseries. After the Clinton letter to Iger, a second wave of attacks began, with the outrage by Clinton supporters reaching to the highest levels of the news media and even into the halls of the United States Congress. Soon-to-be Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid and 4 other Democratic senators wrote their own letter to Disney ABC, calling for the path to 9/11 to be edited or pulled from the air entirely, while even going so far as to essentially threaten their broadcast licenses.
It's a work of fiction, and that's what it is. And yes, they should pull it.
I mean, I think that what Harry Reid and those senators did in that letter, essentially, was to try and censor this movie and force this company's hand in true Stalinist fashion.
That conduct was so un-American and so repulsive, and yet the Democrats in the Senate joined with them and wrote a letter that was basically threatening to ABC television, basically warning them about their licenses.
I mean, can you imagine if 5 Republican lawmakers had made that kind of threat to Disney over Fahrenheit 9/11? It would be such a story and such a firestorm. And by the way, none of those 5 senators